Hi, welcome to this third summary of Bhagavad Gita summary series, chapter 3, Adhyaya 3, and its name is the KARM YOG, the path of action. So, until now, we have discussed two summaries, chapter 1 and chapter 2, that was Arjun Vishad Yog, where Arjun is lamenting, crying over the consequences of the war, which he has gone through in his mind without even fighting the war, and he is not happy with the consequences, and so he is crying. So that was chapter 1, and chapter 2 was where Krishna speaks and he is trying to dispel the ignorance of Arjun by telling him that we are souls, and what he sees in front of him as enemies are souls, and if he's killing them, he's not actually killing the soul, he is just destroying the body, which gets destroyed otherwise also when we become old. So but when he's killing them, he is doing his dharma, and there's nothing greater than dharma, the duties which we are here for in this world. And if do his dharma, then it will bring him dishonor, which is worse than death. So Arjun should go ahead and do his dharma and kill those standing in front of him in this war. And then Krishna discussed about the when he said dharma, what kind of duties should we do when performing our dharma. So whatever duties we do, they should be done selfless, with a selfless intention, selfless desires. And then he also touched on the topic of Karma Yoga, which we will be discussing today, where we should focus only on the actions and should not worry about the consequences, which Arjun was indulging into. He was going through the consequences, and that's why he was getting emotional. So Krishna is saying that focus only on the activity, not on the outcomes, because you are not entitled to any fruits. That I will decide when to give, what to give, how to give. So do not worry yourself with the fruits or the reward. Just focus on the process. And lastly, he also discussed the qualities of a wise person, how a wise person behaves in this world, one who is self-realized. And then in the last leg of second Adhyaya, Shree Krishna discusses how the self-realized person, how the jnani behaves in this world, because they are the ones who have controlled their mind and their senses, and they are only absorbed in God, and the only thing that they desire is union with God, and they do not desire anything else. Also, they have no sense of greed or ownership or egoism, and they attain perfect peace. They are not affected by any pain and pleasure or success and failure in this life, and they are like in the attachment and aversion. So they don't have any strong liking or disliking for anything else. And now we'll be discussing a few important key verses from chapter 3, Adhyaya 3, which is Karm Yog. Basically, the chapter is in continuation with chapter 2 only, because now Arjun, after listening to whatever Krishna told in the second Adhyaya, now his question to Krishna is, "Oh Krishna, you have said that knowledge is greater than action. Then why do you ask me to wage this terrible war? Your advice seems inconsistent. Give me one path to follow to the supreme good." And now Krishna is saying that at the beginning of time, I declare two paths for the God self-realization and God realization, and for the purification of the soul. Gyan Yoga, the contemplative path of spiritual wisdom, and Karm Yoga, the active path of selfless service. One cannot achieve a freedom from karmic reactions by merely abstaining from work, nor one can attain perfection of knowledge by mere physical renunciation. So it is said that devotion without philosophy is sentimentality, and philosophy without devotion is intellectual speculation. Action and knowledge are necessary both in Karma Yoga and Sankhya Yoga. It is only their proportion that varies, creating the difference between the two paths. So the first line of this verse refers to Karma Yogi, follower of the discipline of work, and the second line refers to the Sankhya Yogi, follower of the discipline of knowledge. Verse 3 to verse 9, Krishna is stressing on the importance of working in this world, because Arjun has asked him whether he should choose the path of knowledge or he should choose the path of work. So both are very important in this world, and one without the other is incomplete. And also he goes on saying that no one can remain in this world without work. Even to maintain our body, we need to work. So we are always working, and work is performed either with speech or with mind or with body. So even if we don't do any physical activity, our body or mind will be still engaged in some kind of work. So no one in this world can remain without work even for a single second. So the sannyasis who renounce the worldly life and duties, but their senses dwell on worldly pleasures, Krishna called them to be mithya achara, or the pretenders. They pretend to be spiritually inclined, but their senses dwell on worldly pleasures. So what Krishna is focusing on here is the importance of work, even if you don't become a sannyasi. Even when you become a karm yogi are those who live in this world, who are engaged in worldly activities, but still their mind is engaged in the selfless service. So it's okay if you are engaged in it's okay if you don't become a sannyasi, but do not become a pretender. There's a very interesting story here to prove this point. So once there were two brothers, Tavrit and Sovrit, and they were both going to the temple to listen to a Bhagavatam discourse. And while they were on their way, it started raining, and they had no choice but to wait in a building nearby. And when they went inside, they found that it was a brothel where women were dancing to entertain their guests. So Tavrit got restless, and he said that I cannot be here, and I have to go. And he just left the place, and he reached temple, and he starts listening to Bhagavatam. And then he thinks to himself, oh no, it's so boring. Why have I come here? I should have remained there. And my brother Suvrit must be enjoying there. It is such a mistake to come here. Whereas on the other hand, Suvrit was sitting in a brothel, but his mind was in the temple with the Bhagavatam, and he was thinking that my brother Tavrit must be bathing in the knowledge of Bhagavatam, and he's so lucky, and it is my sin, it is my fault that I remained here and I could not brave this rain. I should have done that. And so they both started in the opposite direction, and lightning struck and they both died. And the Yamdut came to take them to hell and heaven. So the Yamdut picked Tavrit, who was in the temple, to take him to hell. So he said, oh no, you are doing a mistake, because it was my brother Suvrit who was at the brothel. I was in the temple. So Yamdut says, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm supposed to take you to the hell, because you were sitting in the temple, but your mind was dwelling on the pleasures of the brothel, whereas your brother was sitting in the brothel, but his mind was dwelling on the Bhagavatam and Lord Krishna and what he was missing there. So Tavrit was doing exactly what Shree Krishna is telling in this verse 3.6, that he had renounced the object of senses externally, but internally his mind was developing on them. His senses were still there. So this is the important thing to learn here, that sometimes people pretend that they are holy and they think of God, but still their senses keep running to the worldly pleasures, and they pretend that they are one of the holy people. So beware of them. So that's what Krishna says, that do not be a pretender. In the next few verses, he is telling that who are superior. Superior are the karm yogis, who have controlled their senses and with their mind, and who work in this world without any attachment. And then he goes on saying that action is superior to inaction. Laziness is the greatest enemy of humans, and especially it resides in their own body. Work is the most trustworthy friend and is a guarantee against any downfall. Even the basic body activities like eating, bathing, and maintaining proper health require work. So until the mind and intellect reach a state where they are absorbed in God consciousness, physical work performed in an attitude of duty is very beneficial for one's internal purification. Hence, Vedas and Gita both stress upon prescribed duties for humans to help them discipline their mind and senses. And how should we do this work? So the intentions behind the work is very, very important. Work must be done as a sacrifice to the God. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. So in this verse 3.9, he goes on saying that work done for the enjoyment of one's senses and the gratification of one's pride is the cause of bondage in the material world, while work performed as a sacrifice for the pleasure of Supreme Lord liberates one from the bonds of Maya and attracts divine grace. In the beginning of creation of this world, God created the world and the conditions were like duties for the survival and success. Everybody in this world has to do some duty for their survival and to, and to be successful in this world. Without performing their duties, no one can reach anywhere in this world or beyond this world. By your sacrifices, the celestial gods will be pleased, and by cooperation between humans and the celestial gods, prosperity will reign for all. So, celestial gods were appointed to administer the smooth running of this world, and cooperation between them and human is important. The celestial gods, when get satisfied, will grant you all the desired necessities of life, but those who enjoy what is given to them without making offerings in return are verily thieves. So what he means by this is that we walk on this earth, we take oxygen from trees, and we take sunlight from sun, and we drink water. But if we don't give back anything to this nature, if we don't contribute in the betterment of this nature and society, then we are only thieves. We are just taking, and we're not giving back. So then God thinks that those people are thieves if we don't do any duty or we don't make any contribution. So like the food comes from rain, and rain comes from sacrifice to God. And when we say sacrifice, it does not mean yagya or something. It means something that will contribute to the trees and the nature, and which will bring rain in this world. So food comes from rain, and rain comes from sacrifice to God. And sacrifice is when we perform our duties, when we contribute. And this is what Vedas suggest, and Vedas come from God. So what he is saying that whatever is happening in this world, so God is controlling this cycle. God is present everywhere. He's in food, he's in rains, he's in sacrifice, he's in Vedas. So everything is run by God. So he's still stressing on the point that those who do not do their responsibilities, those who don't do their prescribed duties, those who run away from their responsibilities and live from morning till evening for the pleasure of senses are definitely in vain, and they will only face sorrows and miseries in this life. And now in this verse 3.17, Krishna says that those who have given up desires and are fully satisfied in themselves are self-realized, and having find their source of joy and happiness, they no longer depend on the external world. And for such people there is no duty. Even if they work or don't work, it's okay. But such people should continue on doing their duties, because otherwise the wise will create discord in the intellects of ignorant people who are attached to fruitive actions by inducing them to stop work. Rather, by performing their duties in an enlightened manner, they should inspire the ignorant also to do their prescribed duties. So such wise, illumined people, self-realized people should continue on doing their work, though they are not bound by the work anymore, just to set an example in this world. And now the verse 3.27, all activities are carried out by three modes of material nature. But in ignorance, the soul, deluded by false identification with the body, thinks itself to be the doer. Until now, Krishna was saying that we should do the activities, but now he's trying to stress on the point that while we are doing the activities, we should not think of ourselves as a doer, because a doer is the Prakriti. This Brahmand is made of three energies: divine energy and spiritual energy, which we are, and the material energy, which is Prakriti. So this Prakriti is basically the energy of manifested energy of God, and he has created this energy so that we can survive in this world, and we can do our activities, and we can purify our souls, and then we can get liberated from this cycle of samsara, this cycle of life and death. So Prakriti is the material energy which is controlling everything, which is who is the doer. So everything in this world is carried out and controlled within these three modes of material nature, which are goodness, sattva, passion, rajas, and ignorance, tamas. So there are three modes: sat, raj, and tam, and we all comes within these three modes. And in fact, the work that we do also falls within these categories. when it is for the service of God, and when it is done in the purity of mind with the selfless service, then it comes in Sat. And when it is totally done for selfish desire, then it's in ignorance. And when there's a mix of both, some good and some selfishness, then it falls in the category of Raj. So just as waves are not separate from the ocean but a part of it, similarly the body is a part of Mother Nature from which it is created. Hence, material energy is the doer of everything. The Prakriti is the doer of everything. So we should not take this ownership of the activities that we are doing, that I have done this or I have done that. No, we are not the doer. It's the material energy, the Prakriti, that is the doer. Prakriti is the doer. It's the Prakriti that influences our senses and bring the sense objects in front of us. But wise souls understands this game of Prakriti and they don't get trapped in this game. So Prakriti or material energy, or sometimes I call it Maya, is controlling whatever is happening in this world, and and wise understand this and don't get entangled with the sense of ownership and doership. They just do their duty and they sacrifice in the feet of Lord. So performing all works as an offering unto me, constantly meditate on me as the Supreme. Become free from desire and selfishness, and with your mental grief departed, fight, O Arjun. Do your duty. And now in verse 3.36, again Krishna comes back to the same point, that action is superior to inaction. Krishna is saying in this verse, even wise people act according to their natures, for all living beings are propelled by their natural tendencies. What will one gain by repression? So we all are born in this world with the baggage of our sanskaras, of endless past lives. But in this world are born with certain minds, certain interests, certain certain modes of nature. Like if you'll see there are twins in a family, but they will be totally different sometimes in their nature and in the way they perform in this world, and that is because of their past karmas, and which decides their interest and their intellect and their mind and their senses. So the proper and easier way of spiritual advancement is to utilize the immense force of whatever habits and tendencies they are born with, and then work accordingly. So Arjun was a warrior by nature, so Shree Krishna is telling him that your own Kshatriya warrior nature will compel you to fight. Even if you don't want to fight, your intrinsic nature is of a warrior and it will compel you to fight. So this verse 3.35 is very, very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, where he's trying to prove this same thing again, that it is far better to perform one's natural prescribed duty, though tinged with faults, than to perform another's prescribed duty, though perfectly. In fact, it is preferable to die in the discharge of one's duty than to follow the path of another, which is fraught with danger. So sometimes in this world we feel that what others are doing is looks better to us, and we want to do that, and we may do it even perfectly, but that if that is not our prescribed duty, if that is not our dharma, then we should not do that, because we may do it perfectly for some time, but then we will be lost. Sometimes it is more enjoyable for us to pretend to be someone else, because we always say grass is greener on the other side. So what others are doing sometimes is more appealing to us, but the duties born of our own nature are much easily performed with the stability of our mind. The duties of others may seem attractive from a distance, and we may think of switching, but that is a risky thing to do. If they conflict with our nature, they will create disharmony in our senses, mind and intellect. But duties which are born out of our own nature are effortless to us, and they will be in harmony and in sync with us. So even if we find others' duties more interesting, we should not engage in those activities, because they are not natural to us. Whatever is natural to us is born out of our own habit, our own nature, our own skills, our own innate talents that we are born with. So we should stick to our own duties. So we should stick to our own duties irrespective of how difficult they are or how interesting other duties are. And because our warrior Arjun is very practical here, and whatever their conversation is going on, he brings back to his practical way of living. So now he's asking that sometimes what is that force that bind us to selfish deeds? O Krishna, what power moves us even against our own will, as if something forcing us? So Arjun wants to know that sometimes even know that we have to act selflessly, but what is that force within us that force us, drives us towards those sense objects and desires? What is that? Lord Krishna is saying that it is the lust alone which is born of contact with the mode of passion. When our senses come in contact with sense objects, and that liking that drives us or attaches us to that sense objects, and then it further leads into attachment and greed and desire and anger. So these are all the enemies of our advancement in this life. And in the next verse 3.38, Krishna is trying to tell that how our intellect, our knowledge gets covered with the desires, just like a fire covered by smoke is the sattvic category. A mirror which is naturally reflective gets obscured by dust and is semi-opaque is the rajasic desires on the intellect, and an embryo gets concealed in the womb. So this is complete concealment is the consequence of tamasic desires, so clouding our power of discrimination. So the ability to decide what is right and wrong is called discrimination, and this lives in our intellect. And desires or the lust have the capability to control our intellect, to completely conceal our intellect. And so desires are our real enemies, and they burn like an unquenchable fire which never brings happiness to anyone. The more you satisfy the desires, the more their desires will be. So there's no end to the desires, and we can never ever satisfy them, because more we satisfy, more we'll have desires. So they keep on increasing with every satisfaction, or actually the every act of satisfaction. How much we try to satisfy, they never get satisfied. And when the intellect is clouded, the living being is deluded to become a slave of lust and will do anything to satisfy it. We experience this whole material world through our five senses. Senses come in contact with these sense objects, that could be an object or a person or any other pleasure. Then the mind analyzes it, perceives it, and the intellect decides if it's good or bad, and depending on that the mind gets attached to it. So attachment is a function of mind. So if some person or object repeatedly comes to the mind, then clearly means that mind is attached to that object or person. So that is why knowledge is very important to control our intellect, which can control our mind and which can further control our senses. Because of lack of knowledge, the intellect gets clouded and the living being is deluded to become a slave of lust and will do anything to satisfy it. So now Krishna is telling Arjun in the second last verse of this chapter, therefore, O best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, bring the senses under control and slay this enemy called desire, which is the embodiment of sin and destroys knowledge and realization. Superior to the gross body and superior to the senses is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect, and even beyond the intellect is the soul. So Krishna is mentioning here that the body is made of gross matter, and superior to it are the five knowledge-bearing senses. Beyond the senses is the mind. Superior to mind is the intellect, and superior to intellect is the soul. Thus, knowing the soul to be superior to the material intellect, O mighty armed Arjun, subdue the self, senses, mind and intellect, by the self, the strength of the soul, and kill this formidable enemy called lust. So in this last verse of this chapter, Krishna is asking Arjun to know the power of the soul, which is the most powerful of all, because soul is a part of God, it is divine in nature, and thus this divine bliss it seeks only can be attained from a divine subject, while all the objects of the world are material, and they are actually immaterial for the happiness of the soul. So Arjun, know your soul to be higher above all, and know that it has the power to control your intellect, your mind, and your senses. So those were the 43 verses in this Adhyaya that we gave a quick glance and try to understand their meaning. And to conclude this summary, what we learned in this chapter was that knowledge is good, but action is great, because for we karm yogis who have to live in this world, action is superior, and we should not become sannyasi, or we should not shun our duties. We should not run from our responsibilities. We should contribute in this world towards the Prakriti, who is the doer, and we should not take any ownership for anything that we are doing, because we are not the doer, and we only have control over the process, over the duties. We don't have any control over the fruits of the duties. Also, we understood that our following our prescribed duties, our swadharma, is better than going after someone else's duty, which may look good but which will not feel good to us in the long run. So we should always focus on our own prescribed duties, which is born out of our own intrinsic nature, our own talents, our own inborn skills and habits. So we should focus on our own duty. And last but not the least, we should control our desires, because they are the real enemies. We should control our desires by self-realizing ourselves as souls, and we are more powerful than our mind and intellect and senses. So that's all from this chapter summary, and I'll see you again in my next video, next chapter, next Adhyaya summary. Till then, take care, control your desires, control your senses, and Jai Shri Krishna.